I was told the 737 jet hit the building.
On September 11, 2001, 4 airplanes were hijacked by 19 militants associated with the Islamist extremist group Al-Qaeda. They carried out suicide attacks on targets in the United States. One plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania, another hit the Pentagon, and the other 2 planes were flown into the towers of the World Trade Center. In New York City, the first plane flew into the North Tower. 18 minutes later, the second plane flew into the South Tower. The attacks resulted in 3,000 deaths in both New York City and Washington, D.C. The attack shook not only America, but the rest of the world. The day after the attack, the French newspaper Le Monde wrote, "Today we are all Americans. The whole world mourned the tragedy and devastation that had occurred that day." After the attack, Americans around the country began to commemorate the victims and demonstrate their patriotism. American flags were popping up everywhere, on front porches, cars, windows, and clothing. A young man in New York City's Union Square told a reporter the sense of unity being felt around the nation by saying, "We all feel differently about what to do in response, but everybody seems to agree that we've got to be together no matter what happens." Prior to 9/11, there was very minimal airport security. After the attack, that all changed. The Transportation Security Administration was created, issuing stricter security and precautions to prevent another catastrophic attack. People were to take off their shoes and go through security checks. Changes inside planes were also enacted, such as keeping cockpits locked.
Also, think about the cockpit. Remember the door being open with children in flight getting a peek inside. Now it's locked with, at times, a flight attendant standing guard. Not to mention the guy sitting next to you may be an undercover cop.
The government also took action to improve America's homeland security. Visas and U.S. citizenship became harder to attain, and U.S. immigration policy changed drastically with the Homeland Security Act and the Enhanced Border Security and Visa Entry Reform Act of 2002. But security was not the only thing that changed after the attack. Many Americans were left feeling frustrated and angry at what happened on American soil. Some Americans took these feelings out on Muslim and Muslim Americans residing in the U.S.
That as a 20-year-old college kid, I found myself, my family, and thousands of other Muslim, Sikh, South Asian, Arab, Latino Americans suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of that line. We became automatically suspect, potentially terrorist, perpetually foreign.
There were roughly 600 reported attacks on people of Arab and Muslim descent during the first 10 days after the attack. The attacks by Muslim terrorists seemed to worsen the general public's attitude toward Muslim Americans. In fact, following September 11, 2001, the Federal Bureau of Investigation reported a 1,700% increase of hate crimes against Muslim Americans.
I'm at the point now where people should be educated enough to know that I did nothing wrong, and you don't get to just project your hate and your anger at me, especially when I'm a direct reflection of what you are. I am just as upset about the situation as you are.
There have been many personal stories shared from the perspective of Americans from Arab and Muslim descent. Sandra Hurd from Tampa, Florida shared hers to a news source.
Although I come from a country in the Caribbean, Americans thought I was Iraqi, Pakistani, you name it. No one would sit next to me on the commuter bus to and from the city. My seat was often empty despite the bus being completely full. People in New Jersey would stare at me at the supermarket, on the bus, in the stores. One clerk at the supermarket acted like I was invisible while waiting for service.
But where are we now? After the attacks, wars in Afghanistan and Iraq bred new terrorist and extremist groups that didn't exist pre-9/11. Members who pledged their allegiance to these groups, such as one of the most well-known, ISIS, have situated other attacks in America post-9/11. These attacks include the Boston Marathon in 2013 and the shootings of Fort Hood, Texas, in 2009 conducted by Nidal Hasan. Although new security measures have been implemented and the Taliban government has been removed from power, extremist groups like Al-Qaeda, who conducted the attacks in New York 14 years ago, are still active in many parts of the world. Despite the improvements of our national security, the threat of terrorism still poses in America, as well as the rest of the world.
As terrorists before them. If you doubt America's commitment, or mine, to see that justice is done, just ask Osama bin Laden. Ask the leader of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, who was taken out last year. or the perpetrator of the Benghazi attacks, who sits in a prison cell. When you come after Americans, we go after you. And it may take time, but we have long memories, and our reach has no limits.
Despite all the bad that has happened to our country, it is very important to recognize those who have helped us through those times. They are why we have been able to get back up on our feet after incidents such as 9/11.
Tremendous amount of heroism, courage, and patriotism demonstrated that day. And we need to continue to remind everybody in this country that that existed, that it exists today, and we need to constantly thank those who are putting their necks on the line every day.
When I think of them, I think, yeah, that's the best of New York, that's the best of America, that's the best of humanity. Thank you.
To the thousands of men and women who worked so heroically for the rescue at the World Trade Center, our nation thanks you.
Thank you.